Manera, it's me, AB, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, welcome. My name is AB. I am a third-year law student, and I am on the brink of graduation, or on the brink of finishing law school, and I cannot wait. Oh my gosh, you guys have no idea. Cannot wait to be done. What we're gonna do today is a case brief, okay? And today's case is Lawrence v. Texas. I wanna thank one of the subscribers who had this idea to cover this case. Very, very controversial case and in time for Pride Month. So I just wanted to let you guys know it is a controversial issue. So for those of you that are active in the comments, I am going to ask that you become, or not even become, that you're just respectful because it is a issue that is near and dear to many people. So we want to make sure that we are respectful of that. Also, announcement. I'm doing something different with this video, okay? Listen guys, feel free to be abundantly honest with me. If it's something that you're not feeling, tell me and we'll bring it back to the old format, okay? But what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be putting on my makeup as I break down this case for you, okay? A little bit different. And I know half of the guys are ready to click off, but before you click off, I think there's two things that you can learn from this. Number one, you'll learn why it takes women so long to get ready, right? And number two, the braid swirl's here. The braid swirl is here. You get a glimpse of how I put it together, right? Stick with me, let's get started. But while we're doing this, why don't we go ahead and start talking about the basics about this case. So what is this case? This is Lawrence v. Casey. This is a 2003 case, okay? And what you're gonna learn is that, as I gave you guys a disclaimer, it is quite the controversial topic, but this was a case that was delivered by Justice Kennedy, okay? So let's first talk about the issue. And like any good issue statement, we always just like to look at what brings us into court, right? Whether it is a situation that couldn't be decided in a lower court or wherever the case may be, because this is a United States Supreme Court issue, of course it's traveled through the court system. So the issue in this particular case is whether the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment included a right and a liberty in an individual's decisions concerning intimacy, right? Intimacy. In this case, we have two gentlemen in, their effort to be intimate together, okay? And whether those intimacies of their physical relationship is something that the government can impede on. Doing my hair and doing this is going to be a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. About the holding, right? I like to talk about that first so that way you guys have an understanding of what actually happened in the case. So the holding is, yes, the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment included a right to liberty of an individual's decisions concerning the intimacies of their physical relationships. Okay, let's talk procedural history. You guys know procedural history is how the case kind of moved through the court system. This was a Texas case, right? So meaning that the statute that we're talking about originated in Texas. So we would need to look at the Texas laws. So obviously they're going to start in a Texas district court. After they, bought it in Texas district court, the decision was made. That decision was appealed. So we went to a Texas court of appeal. And then after that, the convictions were upheld, right? They were confirmed, meaning the last route, you guys know, is the Supreme Court of the United States. Okay, so let's just jump right into it. So here's the facts of this particular case. It starts in Texas. We have two police officers who are responding to a house call, okay? Now, when they're responding to this house call, they're dispatched to the home of John Lawrence, who's the defendant in this particular case, right? And it was a weapons disturbance. So you're like, okay, why are the police responding to a weapons disturbance? Sorry, my computer is going off. But what does that mean? Like, I wonder what that 911 call was like. You know what I mean? Like, why are they calling on a weapons disturbance? Anyway, so they bust in, the police officers. I don't know how. It seems that there isn't an issue with how they got into the person's home. But anyway, they walk in on Mr. Lawrence and his partner in the act, okay? Just in the middle of the act. So obviously that is a shocker to police officers, because who wants to walk in on that, right? So that's what you saw. And then the state of Texas charged Lawrence and his partner with deviant sexual misconduct, okay? This is two guys, so, you know, not the norm. Now let's go into a little bit of a history lesson with this, because as I was rereading this case, I thought that the opinion made a fair point, right? And that particular point was, you know, when did these type of laws get enacted where, you know, you want to dissuade people from engaging in that type of sexual conduct, right? And it really started, we always talk about common law, in the 1500s, right? Because a lot of our laws are derived from, you know, common law from England, okay? So it started in the 1500s where, you know, and it wasn't gender specific. It's just, if you think about the act of sodomy, like they just wanted to make sure that people were not engaging in sexual conduct that wasn't like procreating, right? Procreative sexual misconduct. That's what I'm looking for. That's the term I'm looking for. This is really hard, guys. I'm sorry. Trying to focus on this and tell you this story is difficult, but I thank you guys for sticking with me so far, because this is not easy. So you might be saying, well, AV, that's how it ended up there, but how did it end up here, right? In the US, like when we, you know, started enacting these laws in the States. Really something you started to see a lot of states enact in the 1800s, right? The 1800s up until now, I believe at one point, all 50 states had these type of laws where it's just like, you know, we want to make sure that if you're doing it, do it to procreate, okay? Go forth and procreate, go forth and prosper, right? So that was the intention behind it. So initially, it was not something that was done for the same genders, right? Eventually though, and we'll start to see in a second, that's where we have some issues. So let's talk about the court's reasoning and rationale in this particular case, because it's an interesting one. You know, we talk about the majorities and the majority opinion, and you have those minority opinions as well, where, you know, people definitely want their dissent listed on the record, and we'll talk about that in a second. But let's first just talk about the first part of the reasoning, and that is the right to liberty under the Due Process Clause. Now, if you guys have been with me for my first few videos, then you know we talked about due process and the due process clause under the 14th Amendment and equal protection, right? We talked about that in Roe, and we also talked about it a little bit more in Planned Parenthood v. Casey. And I'm going to come back to that because Justice Scalia and his dissent had some interesting thoughts there that we're also going to talk about. But, you know, when you come to the rationale, we talked about equal protection and what that means. It's really just looking at when the government can get involved in, you know, a decision that you make as a personal person. So whether that's abortion, and then in this case, it's sexual activity, okay? Now, this right to liberty has also been extended to personal decisions related to marriage, procreation, contraception, family relationships, child rearing, all of that good stuff, and education. There is, however, a different case that we need to talk about here, and that is down in Georgia. It's Bowers versus Hardwick, right? Now in Bowers, you had a similar situation. Georgia had a similar law, right? Where, you know, to dissuade folks from engaging in sodomy, what they ended up doing was enacting this law. In the Bowers case, it was a similar scenario. You have two people that were kind of engaging in that type of conduct, right? And, you know, Georgia had the law prohibiting it. But what they saw, and this ended up in the Supreme Court, was really talking about like, hey, you know, the court framed the issue as whether individuals have a fundamental right to engage in that particular type of sexual conduct. You know, the difference between this case and in Texas is that the Texas statute was specifically like same gender. You can't do this, right? See how that's a little bit more targeted? Whereas in Georgia, it was not gender specific, okay? So additionally, there was a decision issued, okay? And what did that decision say? That there was an emerging awareness that gives liberty a substantial protection to adult persons on deciding whether or not they want to engage in this type of sexual activity. I mean, think about it. Like, let's say if, you know, they were able to just like pop in the bedroom and be like, hey, that is not something you should be doing. And I guess that's really what this case stands for, you know? It's just like, should you be able to regulate what I do in the bedroom, right? The other key issue that came up here is whether the majority was able to use the power of the state to enforce its views of the morality of the whole society, right? And that's through the operation of criminal law, which is a little crazy, you know? Like, to be able to do that is an interesting thing. And the answer that the court found was no, right? You shouldn't be able to kind of shape things based off of morality. You know, this is a religious thing too. Like, there are religious undertones and things like this. There are some religions that are just, this is just like super frowned upon, you know? So it's an interesting thing. The court found that it wasn't a sufficient reason for upholding a law prohibiting the practice, okay? So that was something that was super interesting when I reread it. But here's what happened ultimately, and ultimately Bowers was overruled, okay? Here's the problem with that. Bowers was overruled, and when that particular decision happened, you know, we were talking about state interest before, right? And when you have like a compelling government interest, we talked about strict scrutiny. I always struggle saying that. All of that kind of came up again, because if you think about it, it's the intrusion of the individual, the intrusion of their lifestyle. All of that stuff was important, you know, so they had to talk about it. That's the rule of law as it stands today. And I'm sorry guys, this is gonna look like I have Coke on my face, but this is powder, okay? Especially for men. You guys are probably like, what the hell do women do? Why do you guys do this? Well, we talked about the rule of law, did we? I don't know, maybe that got cut off. But just to be clear, the rule of law is that the 14th Amendment, the Due Process Clause, does protect an individual's right to privacy when it comes to, you know, their sexual orientation and, you know, not being criminalized for that, right? So the court made a huge decision here in 2003, but I think the most important part, and one of the parts we're going to cover, is the dissent, because the dissent had some interesting things there. So who delivered the dissent? Of course, you know, it was Justice Scalia. Back in this time, he was like he wasn't playing any games, okay? So what did the dissent say? The dissent basically said the majority didn't have enough to, like, you know, overturn stare decisis. And we talked about what stare decisis meant, right? Stare decisis is a Latin term. It is a decision that's already made, right? And basically, in judicial review, if you're gonna overturn something, you need to have the right rationale and reasons to do it, okay? Scalia didn't think that we had that in this particular case. And the other thing that kind of comes up as well is that the Bowers decision, especially with the Bowers decision, it was the right to engage in that particular type of same-sex sodomy. It wasn't a fundamental right, at least according to Scalia. He did not think it was fundamental at all. At all, right? And the majority otherwise didn't hold in this opinion like a strong enough reason and a strong enough rationale behind kind of coming up with a decision that would hold, right? Instead, they used rational basis. Here's why that's a problem, okay? And I kind of understand where he's coming from this, but again, I'm not putting my personal opinions in this stuff, guys, because, you know, it can get a little crazy if you do. I just want you guys to walk away with the facts of this case. And essentially, if you are creating laws that are based off of morality, we're not really doing what we're supposed to do from the legal side, where we're supposed to remain completely impartial, right? When you pick sides like that, what happens is that, you know, you can get involved with political issues, and that's not what the 3 branches of government are for. The reason why we have 3 separate branches of government is so that they all have 3 different functions. The judicial system is really to interpret the laws and make sure that they are in accordance with the Constitution, right? So that's something that was super important and a key takeaway from this case. So there you have it. That's Lawrence v. Casey. Again, different format. I hope you guys liked it and it wasn't a dumpster fire, but even if it was, I want to know. You guys know I have thick skin, so please leave your comments down below and we'll see how this video does. Anywho, I want to thank you guys for sticking with me, especially doing something different. We're going to continue to push out case briefs. Big shout out to the subscriber that suggested this one. If you guys have any particular cases or issues that you want me to cover, please leave them down below in the comments and we will certainly get after it. The other thing that I want to mention is time savers. Our next time savers video is going to be on like the home gym. It's gonna be on the home gym. You guys are gonna get a tour. Like it's amazing. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please make sure that you subscribe, that you like and comment, share your thoughts. I'm so looking forward to reading them. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.